What's up? This is Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff. On today's show, UNLV still has a chance at the college football playoff. We'll break down if the committee will actually give them a chance. Plus, Pete Carroll still seems hesitant to play young guys. Why won't he play the rookies? Don't tell them they're 2-10. And I've got a fix for a big problem in the NHL. Today's episode is sponsored by Lily Pond Acres. That's my mom. She lives in the middle of nowhere in Mississippi with a farm, and she calls it Lily Pond Acres. She sells things, I think her animals mainly. So go to Lily Pond Acres, Google it, and I don't know, you can buy some cow meat maybe. So shout out to my mom. Also, the primary show sponsor, spoken for the rest of the week. You want to do it next week? Let me know. technicallycorrectvegas@gmail.com. Bischoff's Briefs is spoken for all of next week. So we're doing good. But if you want to sponsor the show, technicallycorrectvegas@gmail.com. Let me know. We'll do something fun. Here we go. UNLV still has a chance at the college football playoff. And here's how it could happen. First, important note. The college football playoff takes the 5 highest ranked conference champions, meaning that if 2 group of 5 champions are ranked in the top 5 of all the conference champions, there would be 2 group of 5 teams in the playoffs. And that's the key here because the ACC title game has 7-5 Duke playing 17th ranked Virginia. Duke is the key to UNLV's playoff hopes. So here's exactly what UNLV needs to play for the college football playoff. Obviously, UNLV has to beat Boise State in the Mountain West title game, have to be conference champs. Then they need help. The American champion, not really relevant here. They're basically guaranteed to be in the playoff. Tulane and North Texas, they're the 2 highest ranked group of 5 champions. Whoever wins that game is going to be one of the 5 highest ranked conference champs. So that game, not important to UNLV. But Duke must beat Virginia because Virginia winning will put Virginia in the playoff as the 4th highest ranked champ. But if Duke wins, that's an unranked 7-5 ACC champion, meaning they are the perfect candidate for UNLV to leapfrog for a playoff spot. But UNLV needs more help than just a Duke win. UNLV also needs James Madison to lose because James Madison sits at 11-1, ranked 25th, and in the Sun Belt Championship. If James Madison wins that game, it seems highly unlikely that a 2-loss UNLV would jump ahead of 1-loss James Madison. So UNLV needs to beat Boise State, needs Duke to beat Virginia, and Troy to beat James Madison. Then the College Football Playoff Committee will have to decide between Duke and UNLV for the final spot in the college football playoff. Here are the resumes of Duke and UNLV before conference championship weekend. Who are you taking? Now, the 2 metrics that I like the most are the ones that actually favor UNLV. Just a coincidence. SP Plus has long been my favorite college football ranking. I think it's the best one. I think it gives us a good look at how good teams are. UNLV's 41 in SP Plus. Duke is 53. SP Plus is a predictive measure. It's not a resume measure. So basically, SP Plus tells us that UNLV would be favored on a neutral field against Duke. I also, in this case, like strength of record because we have 2 teams with very different records and very different strength of schedules, right? If we forgot about the teams, the names, the other metrics, and what conferences they're in, if I just came to you and said, hey, one team is 10-2 and they played the 130th toughest schedule, and the other team is 7-5 and they played the 74th toughest schedule, who's better? Because I have no idea. I don't know which of those is more impressive because it's 3 more wins, but it's damn near the worst schedule in the country versus a middle of the pack schedule for Duke. Strength of record tells us UNLV is more impressive. Strength of record is telling us that they are about 20 plus spots better than Duke in strength of record. So I like that because that comparison is hard to do on your own. Now, FPI favors Duke, game control favors Duke. I do like game control as well because it's basically telling you like how much control do you have of your games. And the good examples for UNLV this year is the Nevada game. They were in control the entire way. That was never in doubt. But the Air Force game, back and forth, you score on every drive, both teams, and the Utah State game where Utah State's kicker could make a field goal, UNLV loses. Those are games where UNLV won, and they get credit for winning those in most of these metrics. But the game control, not very high because they weren't in control. So I do like game control. I think it tells us about the quality of a team, and that does favor Duke, despite having 3 more losses. I think the big takeaway here, though, is you look at these metrics of these two teams, it's a toss-up. Duke is higher than UNLV in some, UNLV is higher than Duke in some, and neither one is like a top 20 team in any metric. There's nothing you can point to that's like, oh, look, UNLV is 18th best or Duke is 11th best. That doesn't exist. These teams are not top 20 in the country, and these metrics kind of show us, all right, there's some things where they're a little higher, but they're both kind of average college football teams this year. And the metrics don't give us a clear indication of which team is actually better, or at least significantly better to make that argument. So I do think legitimately a toss-up between Duke and UNLV. Now, I think there is a big problem for UNLV if this scenario plays out, right? Duke and UNLV winning their conference championships, James Madison losing, and those being the two teams the committee discusses here. And the big problem is that Duke plays 17th ranked Virginia. Virginia's around the 30 mark or better in most metrics. Boise State, who UNLV plays, is kind of in the 50s and 60s. So the metrics that we just looked at going into conference championship weekend, if both UNLV and Duke win, Duke's probably going to move up more in a lot of these metrics. It does matter how you play. Again, game control is about the game. If UNLV is leading by 3 scores for the entire second half, their game control is going to shoot up. Whereas if Duke wins a last-second game, their game control is not going to shoot up. But in theory, or generally speaking, beating Virginia is going to be more impressive than beating Boise State. So the metrics are probably going to go up for Duke if both of these teams win. And I think the committee will look at it and say, well, they beat Virginia. And that will be Duke's best win on the season. That'll be better than any win UNLV has. Boise State would actually be UNLV's best win in this scenario. You can also look at the losses. Duke's worst loss, despite having 5 of them, is still better than UNLV's worst loss on the year. So I think that's a big talking point as well. Best win, worst loss type of thing. Duke's got the edge in both. And then the other one that sticks out, UNLV's strength of schedule is 130th going into this game. It'll go up after playing Boise State, but are they going to get to 120? Like 115 would seem to be the ceiling for one added game onto the schedule. Is the committee actually going to give a playoff spot to a team with a bottom 10 or 20 strength of schedule? Right? James Madison actually has a really bad schedule too. But would they actually do that for UNLV? I think that's going to be used heavily against UNLV this year with no quality wins on the resume. So I ultimately think if it comes down to Duke and UNLV, they will go Duke. But I do think it's close. I think it's a real conversation because the argument against Duke is simply that they have 5 losses. Like that's the argument. There's 5 losses. They would be 8-5 in this scenario. Does the committee want a 5-loss team in the college football playoff? We're only putting 12. How the hell's the 5-loss team getting in? Being 11-2 looks prettier, even if you ignore the other metrics that might be favoring Duke at that point. So I do think the loss column might be UNLV's biggest thing to just say, hey, sure, their schedule is more difficult, but how many chances do they need to show us they're not actually that good? So that would be UNLV's best bet, is just that it's 5 losses, and maybe the committee says there's no way we're putting in a 5-loss team into this college football playoff. So this weekend, schedule-wise, it sets up potentially Very dramatic. UNLV plays Friday at 5 p.m. Again, they've got to win that game. They don't win that game, none of this matters. But Troy and James Madison also play on Friday. Their game kicks off at 4. There is a chance that this is over before UNLV's game with Boise State ends. James Madison wins, and UNLV is like, all right, we can't finish ahead of James Madison, and that knocks us out. But if Troy wins, pulls off the upset, helps out UNLV, and UNLV wins on Friday, the ACC title game between Duke and Virginia is 5 p.m. on Saturday. That and the Big Ten title game are the last games of the weekend. So as far as drama goes, if this scenario plays out for UNLV, you'll be sitting down watching the ACC title game, the last game of the day, the last game before the playoff field gets announced, cheering for Duke to beat Virginia and some final play that would give UNLV a legitimate chance at a playoff appearance. One other thing on this. The chances of all of this actually happening. It technically is only 3 games that needs to go UNLV's way. But if we use SP+, because Bill Connolly, who created SP+, you get percentages of how likely a team is to win. UNLV is expected to win 51% of the time against Boise State. Pretty much a toss-up here in that game. Duke has a 32% chance to beat Virginia. It's not as low as you think. Basically 1 in 3. Duke of beating Virginia. The big problem is Troy. Troy, according to SP+, has a 10% chance to beat James Madison. And so the issue is if you take a 51% chance, a 32% chance, and a 10% chance, and you need all of them to happen, the chances of all 3 happening is 1.6%. That's not very high, but it's not 0. There's 1 weekend of college football left before the playoff field is announced, and UNLV's at 1.6%, not 0. And by the way, they're not even at 1.6 because that could all happen and Duke could go ahead of them. But 1.6%, that's the number you should take. So UNLV's still alive. It's still a real thing, and that's what you need to be cheering for if you want to see UNLV in the playoff. There's one other thing in UNLV football that I want to talk about. And this is all hypothetical. There's no reason to think this actually happened. But 929 ESPN in Memphis, they were suggesting that Memphis should go after Dan Mullen. Memphis lost their head coach to Arkansas. They need to hire a new head coach. And Dan Mullen was a name that was thrown out there. I don't think there's any actual reporting behind that. It's just, hey, what name should they think about hiring? But it got me thinking. Would Dan Mullen leave UNLV for another group of 5 job? By the way, are we supposed to call it group of 6 now that the Pac-12 is going to exist? But would he leave for another group of 5 job? First off, on the money side, Mullen might not even get a raise from Memphis, right? His current contract to UNLV is $3.5 million per season. Memphis was paying their last coach, Ryan Silverfield, $2.45 million per season. More than $1 million less than what Dan Mullen's getting. Memphis is probably going to pay the next head coach more money, but are they going from 2.45 to 4.5? Because for Mullen to get $1 million raise, Memphis would have to go up by $2 million on what they were paying their previous head coach. So I don't know that even there's not even a money oh yeah, Memphis can outpay UNLV, because I don't know if that's the case. And obviously that's a big reason why Dan Mullen might leave, because somebody's going to pay him a lot more money than UNLV is. But beyond the money, is Memphis a better job than UNLV right now? And I think there are a few things to look at. The first one is the conference, which is going to be a problem here for UNLV. But UNLV is about to be in a much worse conference, right? Is the new Mountain West going to get any respect, right? What is 11-1 Mountain West champion UNLV, or I guess 12-1 Mountain West champion UNLV look like next year? Are they basically James Madison? Where, all right, here's your pity, ranked 25th in the country. If Duke wins the ACC, you get to be in, right? Because the American's going to be the best group of 5 conference after the Mountain West Pac-12 disaster that's happening out here. The American's going to be the best. And so probably any year an American champion is 10-2 or better, they're probably going to be it. So conference-wise, I think UNLV's in a worse spot. Also, beyond that, and this is the bigger question for every university, but are either one going to be in a power conference in the future? I think power conferences have already told us they don't want UNLV or Memphis. I think they'd both be in a power conference if the power conferences wanted them, and they're not. So I don't know that either one's getting added. They are certainly both near the top of the list. If there is more expansion from power conferences, I don't know that either one is necessarily higher than the other. It probably depends on which conference expands, right? If the SEC was adding or the ACC, they're probably looking at Memphis before UNLV, whereas the Big 12 would look at UNLV maybe before Memphis. But I don't know that either one's getting in, and they're both sort of in the same spot where they're top of the list, but probably don't get in anyways. So power conference wise, it sucks to be where UNLV and Memphis actually are. Also, just from a coaching standpoint, I think both jobs give you the opportunity to get a power conference job, right? Ryan Silverfield literally just took the Arkansas job. Barry Odom just took the Purdue job last year. So you can clearly come to these schools and get a bigger, higher paying job in a power conference, which is probably a positive note when you're hiring a coach at one of these schools. But the other part is just how good of a program overall are they? UNLV's been awesome for 3 years. Memphis is still probably ahead of UNLV in that regard. Like UNLV's been very, very good the last 3 years, better overall than Memphis, but I still think you'd take Memphis over UNLV right now. And then the one part that I'm not really sure on who would win the comparison here, but this is big for all Group of Five schools. Who's got more NIL money and revenue sharing? Is Memphis going to be better than UNLV at that over the next 5 years? Is FedEx going to be pumping that money in because FedEx is a huge sponsor there and, like, in theory, has enough money to throw around there? I would guess so. I would guess Memphis is a little bit higher, but I don't know. And we've seen that at a higher level with coaches at power conferences. And how much NIL money do you have? What's your revenue sharing, right? Like, that's a selling point for these coaches so that they can build a good roster. Is Memphis going to have significantly more NIL money or revenue sharing? So if the answer to that is yes, then Memphis, I think you would put them ahead of UNLV. But talking about Dan Mullen as a very specific example, I think it's close enough that I have a hard time seeing Dan Mullen leaving UNLV for Memphis. Like, money's probably not going to blow him away. I don't think the aspects of Memphis are bigger, or the advantages are bigger than UNLV. The only reason I could think would be if Dan Mullen was just like, I don't want to be on the West Coast anymore. I want to be back in the Southeast. He's head coach of Mississippi State and Florida, so Memphis is close. That's the only reason I could think, but I don't think you look at this and say, oh yeah, Memphis is going to poach UNLV's head coach, which is good because it means UNLV is probably in a spot where they will only lose their coaches to power conferences. Obviously, that happened last year, and that's not always great, but you don't want to be the school, that loses your coach to another Group of Five. You want to be at the top of that chain so that you only have to worry about the Purdues of the world swooping in and taking your coach. Also, by the way, whether it's him using Memphis or any other job, Dan Mullen's getting a raise, right? He went 10-2 in his first season. He's playing if they win, he's playing won the conference championship and that 1.6% chance they're in the playoff. He's getting a raise after 1 year, right? I think a good coach, good agent, I should say, is getting a raise out of this season for Dan Mullen. But now it's time for Bischoff's Briefs. Next week, Bischoff's Briefs is sponsored. My favorite sponsorship donation yet is coming for Bischoff's Briefs next week. We still got Friday's show, so if you want that, let me know. Technically correct, vegas@gmail.com. But next week, we got a great Bischoff's Briefs sponsorship, partnership, donation coming in. Very excited for that. So you'll get to see it. But we start Bischoff's Briefs. Pete Carroll has not decided who is going to start at right guard for the Raiders. So this past week, we saw James Meredith was inactive, and Caleb Rogers got the start. The rookie third-round pick got the start at right guard. But we also saw Antonio Mafia play more than Rogers. Mafia played 31 snaps, Rogers just 17. Carroll was asked about that position, and he said that they're basically going to have to see what happens in practice this week before they make a decision. Maybe he's already made a decision and is just playing it coy with the media, but at least what he said is that he has not decided yet. Now, despite the snap counts favoring Mafia, so the coaching staff telling us they think Mafia was better, PFF grades actually had Caleb Rogers as the highest graded Raiders offensive lineman in last week's loss. Doesn't mean he was good because most of the linemen were not good, and they aren't most weeks. But he was the highest graded in that game. Specifically, his run blocking got a very good grade. His pass blocking, not a very good grade. But forget about all of that. Why can't the Raiders commit to playing Rodgers? They drafted him in the 3rd round. The offensive line is a disaster no matter who is playing there, and they're 2-10. There's this weird, illusion hanging over the coaching staff that the older guys, the veteran guys, give them a better chance to win because they've been playing well, or they think they will start playing well. I don't know. It's very weird because just play the rookie you took in the 3rd round at this point. The season's over. The other guys aren't better. It's not like we're risking Geno Smith or Ashton Genty's life by putting in Caleb Rogers. Their lives are already at risk behind the guys they're putting out there. So it just doesn't make any sense. Play Rogers, right? Charles Grant, they took another 3rd round offensive lineman. Play Charles Grant as well. Offensive line has been horrendous regardless of who is playing. So play them. I don't understand why it's such a big deal, why it's such a problem for Pete Carroll to actually do this. Also, Jack Bech, wide receiver, played 27 snaps last week. He got drafted in the 2nd round, even a round earlier. Those 27 snaps was actually 56% of the snaps in the game. Raiders didn't have that many offensive snaps. The previous 3 weeks, Bech had played a total of 25 snaps. So a big increase there for Bech. He has 2 games earlier in the year where he played more than 27 snaps. So it's not his career high, but a big increase over the last few weeks. Interesting, though, Pete Carroll got asked about Jack Bech and his playing time, and he was kind of dismissive with his answer. Like, he said he's in the rotation more, but it was like a 2-sentence, 7 or 8 word answer from Pete Carroll when asked about Jack Bech. Very weird, where I feel like Pete Carroll this entire year hasn't said anything nice about Jack Bech. Every time he gets asked, granted, the questions are about why aren't you playing this guy? They're kind of pointed hey, you're making a mistake, but it doesn't seem like there's been any sort of love for Jack Bech and what he can do or could do or why they drafted him. It's just sort of he exists. He's got to earn his playing time. The details have to be better. I don't know. It's very, very strange. And again, this team is 2-10. They're not playing the young guys, and they're 2-10. Play the young guys. You're 2-10. You're eliminated from the playoffs. Think about the future for once. We'll see. Back to some UNLV football, because yesterday was signing day. UNLV has a top 60 recruiting class. They have the best recruiting class in the Mountain West. Boise State is better. But Boise State's not in the Mountain West next year, so that doesn't count. By the way, the reality of what the Mountain West is next season, it's pretty jarring when you go and look at the recruiting rankings, because the top 3 teams in the Mountain West for recruiting rankings right now, it's UNLV 1, it's Northern Illinois 2, and it's UTEP 3. The 2 new guys are 2 and 3. How bad is this conference going to be at football? Because I think it's going to be pretty bad. But UNLV, ranking in the top 60. According to the school, it's the highest they've ever been ranked. They didn't get any 4 or 5-star players, but all 24 players they signed were ranked as 3 stars, according to 24/7 Sports, which is good because a lot of times UNLV's bringing in classes where they've got a bunch of unranked players, but everybody was a 3-star. It's a good class for UNLV. The other question I had is, does recruiting matter? Obviously it matters, but it used to be the lifeblood. It used to be you might hire a recruiter over a guy who can actually coach because you have to have the players, right? But how much does that translate now with the transfer portal, with NIL, where you can get players, or more likely in a group of 5 spot, lose players every single year and replace so much of the roster? So how much of a relationship is there? I'm not going to go through and look at this at the whole landscape of college football because I got Golden Knights games to watch. But just in the Mountain West, first off, the last 2 years, the worst recruiting class in the Mountain West was New Mexico. They went 6-2 this season. So maybe you look at that and say, oh, recruiting doesn't matter. But last year's recruiting rankings, the top 3 were Boise State, San Diego State, UNLV. Those are the three teams that finished tied with New Mexico at the top of the conference. And in the previous year, Boise State was 1, San Diego State was 3, UNLV was 4. So of the 4 top teams in the Mountain West this year, 3 of them have had high, at least in the conference, high recruiting rankings the last 2 seasons. It's a good indicator that recruiting still does matter a decent bit. Probably not as much as before, but it still does matter, and UNLV's got a good recruiting class. I did have an A's update. Super Galaxy on YouTube reminded me, thank you, Super Galaxy, that Goldman Sachs is lending $300 million to John Fisher for construction of the A's ballpark here in Las Vegas. I had forgot about it yesterday when we were going through the money that's coming in for Fisher and how much does this ballpark actually cost? So you have that $300 million coming in. It's also $350 in public funding, $70 million from the group with Chan-Ho Park and Suga from BTS, and then it's $175 million from Aramark. Again, I'm not 100% sure on how much of that 175 goes to the ballpark, but we'll just say all of it for the sake of this. That's $895 million. Obviously, you've got to repay the loan, but that's $895 million in outside funding. Last ballpark estimate was around $2 billion. Is John Fisher putting up effectively $1.1 billion for this ballpark? It sounds like it, though we haven't actually heard or gotten reason to believe that's going to happen other than the LVCVA saying John Fisher tells us he's going to put up $1.1 billion. He's still reportedly been looking for investors, so I'm thinking he would like to find investors that would go in on this, just hasn't actually done that yet. And I think the big thing, my point yesterday with this, is does the cost continue to rise? It's risen 3 times in 18 months. Does that happen again? Do we get to 2.5? Because that's just adding more money that John Fisher has to put in. And at some point, for anybody, there would be a, hey, I can't afford this, right? If hyperbolic, but if all of a sudden the ballpark was $10 billion, I'm guessing John Fisher's walking away and he's not building a ballpark in Vegas. What is that actual number, though? If it jumped to $3 billion, is John Fisher still good for that? I think that's the question that I have since they haven't finalized a cost. Also, another update from something we talked about on the show yesterday. The Olympics in Italy coming up here. Hockey in the Olympics. The arena's not done that they're supposed to be playing hockey at. The Olympics start in February, and the arena's not done. Also, the rink is apparently going to be smaller. The sheet of ice is going to be smaller than what the NHL, NHLPA, and the IOC all agreed to. So that's a problem, too. But Matt Larkin of Daily Faceoff asked Bill Daly, who's the deputy commissioner of the NHL. He asked Bill Daly, what are the percentage chances that NHL players don't actually play in the Olympics? And Bill Daly said, depends on percentage you want to place on the possibility the rink doesn't get completed. If there's no rink completed, there's no NHL players going to the Olympics. I read that kind of like a threat. But first off, if there's no rink, I'm guessing there's no players, period, going to play hockey in the Olympics, because where are they going to play? But that was not a I guess like comforting comment of like, oh yeah, we have confidence this will be done and our players will be safe and everything will be just fine. That was a, you think that building's getting built? Because if you do, we'll be there. But if you don't, guess what? Hockey player or NHL players will not be in the Olympics. So I'd have to get the sense the NHL is pretty pissed at what's happening with the arena and the size of the rink, because this is a concession that they made with the players. I think it's an obvious concession. I want to see these guys in the Olympics more than I want to see the Blackhawks play the Blues on a random Wednesday in February. I'll watch the Olympics, probably won't tune into that NHL game. So I want to see this, but it is a concession the NHL made, and now I don't want to say they're getting screwed on it, but like it's not looking great for what they agreed to with the IOC and the NHLPA. Also in the world of hockey, Stars forward Tyler Seguin is out for the season with an ACL tear. NHL.com, by the way, said he's likely out for the season. So could he come back for the playoffs? That's like, what, 6 months later? That seems unlikely. But is it too obvious Colorado wins the West? Because Dallas is probably their most likely contender in the Central Division. The Pacific Division is just loser points galore. Everybody goes to overtime all the time. Is anybody actually good in the Pacific? the Golden Knights in Edmonton. Wouldn't be shocking if one of them finally figures it out and becomes a top contender. But so far, we haven't seen that from those two. So, like, is it too obvious to just be like, yeah, Colorado's playing for the Stanley Cup this year? I don't know. It's only December. We got a long way to go. They could have somebody have an ACL injury, I guess, and then it's a problem. But it just seems like everything is going the way that Colorado would want it to go. And by the way, they're steamrolling everybody. Or steamrolling their way through the standings. So maybe it's too easy in the West. Maybe it's just simply Colorado. Also, wanted to get to one college football story for you. Does nobody want the Penn State job? Is UNLV going to lose Dan Mullen to Penn State? Because BYU's Kalani Sitake, their head coach, turned down Penn State. And now Louisville's Jeff Brom turned down Penn State. On3 reported that there are donors that apparently want them to just promote the interim head coach, Terry Smith. They might have to go to Dan Mullen. They got turned down by BYU and Louisville. This is a program that, I'm guessing they think they're going to be a playoff team every single year. That's why they fired James Franklin. And now they're getting turned down by Louisville? They might have to come to UNLV and steal Dan Mullen. But I think we're getting maybe the most obvious sign that a program is just actually not that good. Like the whole coaching world is telling us, yeah, not that good. Because what have we seen? We've seen Auburn and Arkansas and Florida and LSU and Kentucky and Oklahoma State, fill these jobs. All those places except what? Kentucky fired their coaches in season just like Penn State. And Penn State hasn't done. Virginia Tech, throw them in there as well because they got James Franklin. All these places fired their coaches and they filled it. They've filled their jobs because people wanted it. And maybe they didn't, shoot too high. Maybe that's what Penn State's problem is. But we're being told by coaches that they don't want that job. They don't want to leave for that job. So I think all these coaches are telling us that Penn State's actually not that good of a job, which leads me to this question. Who's better next season? Virginia Tech with James Franklin or Penn State? Do you know how funny it's going to be if James Franklin takes Virginia Tech to the playoff? God, it would be so great, especially if he does it by knocking off a couple of top 5 teams. Can we get 11-1 Miami losing the ACC title game to 9-3 Virginia Tech next year, and James Franklin goes to the playoffs by beating a top 5 team? Oh, would be spectacular work if that could happen. And Penn State goes 6-6 or something terrible like that. That is it for Bischoff's Briefs. Again, if you want to sponsor it, it's technically correct Vegas at gmail.com. We are going to go back in time, basically a week right before Thanksgiving, because the story I've not gotten to this week that I did really want to talk about, and it's your fault because I didn't have a show last week to actually talk about this, but UNLV played in the Players Era tournament, and the question I have, I'll put the question out there first. Did UNLV lose money playing in that tournament? So the Players Era tournament likes to brand itself as the tournament that gives every school's players $1 million in NIL funding. Except that wasn't entirely true this year. Sportico had a good story on UNLV's deal where UNLV, if you remember, they backed out of the Maui Invitational to play in the Players Era tournament. UNLV got $1 million overall from the Players Era tournament, but only $800,000 of that is going to the players in NIL money because $200,000 of that was taken out to pay the buyout of the Maui Invitational, according to this story in Sportico. So UNLV players lost out on splitting an extra $200,000. Now, granted, I would rather play in the Players Era tournament for $800,000 than in Maui for nothing, so I would still take that deal if I was the players. But beyond that, right, you got to pay this buyout over here. Beyond that, the Players Era forced UNLV to buy tickets. UNLV, according to the story, paid $202,000 to buy 1,500 tickets to each game of the Players Era tournament. And then UNLV, in theory, is supposed to sell those to their fans and could price it at whatever they wanted. Well, the attendance of those games was 3,500 for the first one, 2,800 for the second one, and then I can't imagine it was anything better than that for the game on Thanksgiving Day against Rutgers. But did UNLV actually sell many of those tickets, right? For the game on Thanksgiving, I looked on Wednesday through UNLV's site, And to buy tickets through UNLV's site, it was $170 per ticket. That was 3-4 UNLV against 4-3 Rutgers at 1:30 on Thanksgiving Day, and it was $170 through UNLV. Pretty sure you could buy them on the secondary market for much, much cheaper, but I don't think UNLV gets money from that. They'd have to sell their tickets, which they had $170. That's a wild price. So I think there's a legitimate chance UNLV took like a 6-figure monetary loss to play in the Players Era tournament, which isn't necessarily a bad thing if you get something out of it. This is the biggest tournament, non-conference tournament in college basketball, right? And UNLV got to be a part of it. This is going to be good in theory, right? A bigger scale example of sort of paying for a better scenario. SMU agreed to join the ACC and take no television money, right? Which is a horrible idea because the whole reason you want to be in these big conferences is for the TV money. But they've got a booster that was like, no, get in the ACC. I'll pay you what the TV money would be. Basically, this guy is funding the athletic department without that TV money coming in. So SMU bought their way into a power conference, right? They went to the college football playoff in year one. It paid off, right? So that worked out for them. They bought their way into something better. UNLV, in theory, bought their way into this premier tournament. What did they actually get out of this? They got horrendous time slots. They tipped off 9 p.m. tip-offs on Monday and Tuesday. First one was actually at 9:20, but 9 p.m. tip-offs on Monday or Tuesday, and then a 1:30 tip-off on Thanksgiving Day. Head-to-head with Kansas City and Dallas, right? Nightmare. It would be hard to pick 3 worse time slots to play college basketball on Thanksgiving week. Technically, Wednesday at 9 p.m. would be worse than Monday or Tuesday, but it would be hard to pick 3 worse time slots. Now, they got to play Maryland, a decent team, but UNLV just played Memphis, and those are sort of the same caliber of teams. UNLV doesn't need help playing Maryland, right? Then they got to play Alabama, who's a legit Sweet 16, maybe Final Four caliber team. That's probably helpful. UNLV doesn't just get those all of the times, but they also lost that game by 39 points. I know there's a lot of injuries. It's not really fair to judge Josh Pastner, I think, on a game like that. But if we're looking at this as like, what did UNLV get from it? A blowout loss to Alabama doesn't really do a whole lot. And then they played Rutgers, who's a bad team, right? They're outside the top 100 in Ken Palm. That's a team UNLV, or a level of team UNLV, can easily get for a game. They also lost that game. So what they actually get out of this as a team, now, I don't think anything. I don't think last week helped them at all as a team. And again, the injuries, it's hard to predict that, and you can't really blame them for it. But I don't think they got anything out of it as a team. What they got is the current players on the team get to split $800,000, which is great for the players. For the individual players, phenomenal. They should be making as much money as they can. It's great for them. But like from a fan perspective or just from a program perspective, that sucked. Like last week as a UNLV basketball fan, was there anything fun? Was there anything enjoyable about it? You got the worst time slots, lost all 3 games, blown out in one of them. So there's like no television exposure. There's no one in attendance for these games. Nothing happened to help this team like make an NCAA tournament. Like, was there anything fun? That's the big thing from that is like UNLV might have paid to play in this tournament and then nobody got anything out of it. Like the only thing that I think you can really point to is that, hey, we were in this tournament. We might be in this tournament in the future. And so when you're recruiting or when you're trying to get guys out of the portal, you can say, look, we played in that tournament. That would add some NIL money if we're in it again or in it while you're here. That's it. But that's really like reaching. You're really going out there being like, hey, we played in that tournament. So if you come here, you might make a few, like we're reaching there as far as how beneficiary this is. I also do have a question. Is the Players Era tournament making money? Like, genuinely, these types of tournaments, the non-conference college basketball tournaments, they don't make a ton of money. CBS Sports had a story, and they said that prior to the Players Era tournament, these non-conference tournaments, the best ones would make like $1 to $2 million in total. The Players Era tournament is spending $20 million in NIL funding. That's an expense that these other tournaments don't have. So, good tournament makes $2 million. You come in, you run a good tournament, you make $2 million. But we're also paying the players $20 million that other tournaments do not do. So now we're negative $18 million. I have a hard time believing they're actually making money on this, but they're expanding to more teams next year. So maybe they are, or maybe they don't care, right? I think private equity is behind this. Maybe they simply don't care about actually turning a profit on these games. It's more about controlling something and consolidating something. And then, oh, look at that. We're the only ones that matter. And now we start making money. Maybe that's the plan. Maybe that's the ploy all along. It just seems, I don't know. It just seems like they're paying $20 million and there's 2,900 people there to watch UNLV and Alabama play at 9 o'clock. Like, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like there's actual money coming in to support that. But maybe there is. They're expanding. Players Era doesn't seem to be going away. I'm guessing 5 years from now, it is the non-conference tournament. It's the only thing we talk about. And it's the thing we look forward to in college basketball because they're getting the best teams to come and play on a regular basis. So it's probably going to work. I just don't understand how. All right. Want to wrap up the show doing something fun. So if you have followed me before, you have almost certainly heard me say hockey is dumb. I say it genuinely as a term of endearment. Dumb things happen in hockey. It's what makes the sport fun and chaotic. One of the things that happens is own goals. And I can't believe hockey has been going on for however long hockey's been played, and the sport does not count goals properly. One thing that a sport needs to be able to do is count the score and the method of scoring and do it accurately, record it in the stats accurately. There are no own goals in hockey. We see own goals all the time. The Golden Knights just played a game where 2 of their goals scored should have been own goals by the Chicago Blackhawks, right? Puck has no chance of going in, and then some defenseman comes skating in, and it hits off a skate off his knee. Hell, sometimes they manage to shoot it in themselves. Remember last year in the playoffs, Leon Draisaitl, he scored an own goal that gave the Golden Knights a buzzer-beater win. Riley Smith just threw the puck that was never going to go into the net, and Draisaitl came in and said, what if I deflect this into the back of my own net? Oh, the Golden Knights win. They didn't win another game in the playoffs, but the Golden Knights win. They didn't score another goal in the playoffs either. But we see these own goals all the time, and they are not accurately recorded in stats. So I introduce to you the Department of Own Goals. Tuesday night in Las Vegas, Golden Knights forward Ivan Barbashev was awarded a goal in the first period. As the video shows, Barbashev picks up a loose puck in the neutral zone, then attempts to pass to teammate Braden Bowman. The puck is redirected across the goal line. Barbashev's pass is broken up by the skate of Blackhawks defenseman Wyatt Kaiser. After hitting Kaiser's skate, the puck ends up past goaltender Spencer Knight and into the net. This is an own goal. It is important to note that some goals are scored after defenders deflect a shot past their goalie. This is not such a case. Barbashev is not attempting to shoot. The puck is not traveling on net. Barbashev is passing. Barbashev is not trying to score. To summarize, this is an own goal. Barbashev has not had any other goals reclassified. The Department of Own Goals has reclassified Ivan Barbashev's goal as an own goal scored by Wyatt Kaiser.